My name is Earl Myers. I'm 76 years old, partially blind, and I live alone in a modest two-bedroom house in the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Iowa. I taught English literature for nearly 4 decades at the local high school, and I still have the habit of mentally editing people's grammar when they speak. I suppose it's one of the last remnants of the man I used to be. Since Mary passed away 5 years ago, the days have blurred into each other. A silent routine of mornings with lukewarm coffee and evenings filled with audiobooks and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock that still stands in the hallway. My vision started to go shortly after Mary died. Cataracts, they said. Surgery helped a little, but the central clarity is gone. I can see shapes, movement, shadows. I use a magnifying glass for print and a white cane when I go out, but I am far from helpless. Still, people tend to assume otherwise, which is both insulting and convenient, depending on the context. My son Jason visits once a month, if that. He usually shows up on a Sunday afternoon, sits stiffly in the armchair Mary loved, drinks one of my beers without asking, and talks about himself for half an hour. Then he checks his phone, says something about needing to get back to work or to Amanda, and leaves with a pat on my shoulder that feels like a cold coin being pressed into my hand. Amanda, his wife, comes even less often. When she does, she acts like she's doing charity, fluffing pillows, straightening picture frames, wiping down spotless countertops with an air of superiority that grates against my nerves. She speaks loudly and slowly, as if I were not only blind but deaf and mentally fading. I've never liked Amanda. She's sharp in ways that feel rehearsed, always measuring her words for effect. When she smiles, it doesn't reach her eyes. I suspect she never truly approved of me or of Jason's humble upbringing. Her family is from Chicago, where people wear ambition like perfume. She once told me that her father was a regional bank executive, as if that were some inherited title of nobility. In the first year after Mary died, I tried to stay involved. I sent Jason texts asking about the kids, offered to take them out for lunch, or invited them to help with the garden Mary used to tend with such care. He always had excuses. Soccer games, work, Amanda's parents were in town. After a while, the invitations stopped. I suppose I got tired of offering pieces of myself just to be left unread. The last time I saw my grandkids, Ethan and Lila, was 3 Christmases ago. Ethan was 12, Lila 10. They were polite in that strained way kids are when they've been coached beforehand. They brought me a mug that said, "World's Best Grandpa," and spent the evening staring at their phones while Amanda sipped wine and criticized the insulation in my house. I remember thinking how Mary would have handled it. Probably with grace, offering cookies and ignoring the insults. I, on the other hand, just sat there, wondering when I had become a guest in my own home. There's something uniquely cruel about growing old in America. You don't just age. You vanish. Your worth fades with your productivity, and if you're lucky, you become a quaint memory. If not, a burden. I never imagined this life for myself. Mary and I had plans. We were going to travel after retirement, see the Grand Canyon, visit her sister in Oregon, maybe even Europe if her knees allowed it. Instead, a year into retirement, she collapsed while baking peach cobbler. A stroke, the doctor said. Quick and painless. I still remember the smell of cinnamon when I walked into the kitchen and found her. The bowl had tipped over. Flour was scattered like snow over the floor, and she lay in the middle of it, peaceful as if sleeping. I sat next to her body for hours before calling anyone. I didn't cry then. That came later, in pieces. I talk to her sometimes, quietly when I think no one is around to hear. I tell her about the weather, the progress of the rosebush she planted, how I miss the sound of her humming when she watered the plants. I keep her photo on the mantel, her graduation portrait, not the older ones. She always hated how she looked in later years, though I thought her more beautiful with every passing decade. There's a kind of stillness in my house now, not the comforting silence we once shared, but the absence of life itself. I fill it with background noise, The radio, classical music, old recordings of Mary reading poetry aloud. Her voice was steady, clear, with a warmth that made even frost sound like a lullaby. My health is stable. Aside from my eyesight, I manage well. I cook, I clean. I take my pills on time. Once a week, I walk to the corner store with my cane, nod at neighbors who never remember my name, and buy what I need. I don't like to ask for help. Maybe that's pride or fear, or both. Mary used to say I was stubborn. She wasn't wrong. I have enough savings to live comfortably, though Amanda once asked pointedly if I had considered long-term care options. She phrased it as a question, but the tone was suggestion, and the implication was that I was nearing the expiration date. That was the first time I truly saw her for what she was. Jason just sat there, silent. Not defending me, not objecting, just letting the moment slide past like rain off a windshield. I didn't say anything then, but I made a mental note. A month ago, Amanda called unexpectedly. She said she had been reading about state programs that help the elderly reduce property tax burdens. She offered to come by and help me go through some paperwork. Her tone was syrupy, her concern rehearsed. I said I'd think about it. That same week, Jason dropped by with a casserole, Amanda's recipe, bland and under-seasoned. He sat with me for 15 minutes and mentioned offhandedly that Amanda was really good with legal stuff and that I should let her help. I nodded, but I didn't commit. Something in my gut felt off. The following Sunday, Amanda arrived uninvited, wearing perfume too strong for my sensitive nose and carrying a stack of folders. She hugged me as if she hadn't ignored my existence for a year and sat down at the kitchen table like she owned the place. She began explaining how these documents would help protect my estate, ensure my legacy, and reduce future confusion. Her voice was smooth, like a commercial. I asked if I could have time to read them. She looked at me with a tilted head and a rehearsed chuckle. "Oh, Earl, I thought your vision. Never mind. I'll just read them to you." That was the moment I knew. She didn't think I could see. She thought I was blind enough, gullible enough to sign whatever she put in front of me. I told her I trusted her, asked her to leave the papers with me overnight. She seemed disappointed but covered it with a smile. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need. We just want to help." When she left, I didn't touch the papers immediately. I sat for an hour, listening to the slow tick of the clock, to the silence pressing in from every corner. Then I fetched the magnifying glass Mary had once used for her needlepoint, turned on the strongest lamp in the house, and started reading, line by line. I sat at the kitchen table, the magnifying glass clenched in my right hand, its brass handle warm from the heat of the lamp, and I slowly, deliberately, began deciphering the stack of documents Amanda had left behind. The print was dense, written in that deliberately convoluted legal language designed to make ordinary people feel small and incapable. But I wasn't ordinary, not in that way. I had spent my entire life reading between the lines, of novels, of student essays, of policy memos, and bureaucratic doublespeak. I might be half blind, but I wasn't stupid. And I certainly wasn't going to be tricked by a woman who thought that a little perfume and a patronizing tone could replace honesty. As I moved from one page to the next, I began to see it, clearly, frighteningly. These weren't tax forms. They weren't standard estate planning tools. What Amanda had brought me was something altogether different. The language was careful, but the implications were plain once you knew what to look for. One document, titled with bureaucratic subtlety as a durable power of attorney, granted Amanda complete legal authority over my finances, property, medical decisions, and even living arrangements, effective immediately. Another form, presented as a property transfer and survivorship agreement, would have placed the deed to my house entirely in her name, retroactive to the date of Mary's death. There were waivers of notice, disclaimers, and indemnification clauses, all signed already by Amanda and witnessed by someone named Gina R. I didn't know any Gina R., but I could imagine the type. Someone Amanda had paid or charmed into playing her part in this quiet little heist. The worst part? Every page assumed I wouldn't read a word, that I would sit, smile, and sign, blind and compliant. The rage that boiled in my chest was slow and quiet, not the explosive kind of anger that drives fists through walls, but the cold, sharp sort that freezes a man's spine and keeps him up at night. I felt violated, not only by the documents themselves, but by the assumption underneath them. Amanda saw me as useless, voiceless, finished, and my son, my only child, had sat silently by while she made these plans. That was the deeper betrayal. Not the papers, not the schemes, but Jason's silence. I imagined their conversations behind closed doors, Amanda laying out the strategy like some corporate merger, Jason nodding along, too weak or too indifferent to object. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I laid the papers out across the kitchen table and read them again, slowly, thoroughly, making notes in the margins with a pen I hadn't used since Mary passed. By morning, I had a full understanding of the trap Amanda had set for me, but I didn't call Jason. I didn't confront Amanda. Not yet. Something in me, an instinct perhaps born from decades of teaching rebellious teenagers, told me to wait, to plan, to give them just enough rope to hang themselves. And so I placed the documents neatly back in the folder, clipped them shut, and returned them to the drawer where Amanda had placed them, undisturbed. I even left a sticky note on top that read, "Thanks for helping. We'll review soon." The following weekend, Jason called. "Hey, Dad, Amanda said she dropped off some paperwork. Just checking in. Need help with anything?" His voice was light, casual, like he hadn't conspired to strip me of my autonomy. "No, I'm looking them over. Appreciate you two thinking of me," I replied, my tone equally light. There was a pause. "You sure?" "Amanda can swing by again if it's too much to read." "I'll manage," I said, and that was that. The conversation lasted under 2 minutes. Over the next few days, Amanda texted me twice. The first message said, "Hi, Earl. Just wondering if you had a chance to go over the paperwork. Let me know if you have any questions. Jason and I are here for you." The smiley face felt like a slap. The second message, 2 days later, was more direct. "We need to file some of the documents before the end of the month to meet the deadline for tax processing. It would really help if you could sign, and we'll take care of the rest." I didn't reply to either message. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer, an old student of mine named Olivia Navarro, now in her 40s and practicing estate law in town. She had been one of my brightest students, a thoughtful girl who once wrote an essay on Steinbeck that nearly made me cry. When I called her office and introduced myself, she responded warmly, with genuine respect and affection. We arranged to meet the next morning. When I arrived at her office, Olivia greeted me with a hug. "Mr. Myers, or should I say Earl now?" "You've earned it," I replied with a tired smile. I handed her the folder without preamble. "Tell me what you see." She read for nearly 45 minutes, occasionally raising her eyebrows or muttering under her breath. When she finally looked up, her face was tight. "This is no mistake," she said. "These documents are a full legal takeover. If you had signed them, Amanda would have had the right to move you into a nursing facility, sell your home, access all your accounts, and manage your medical treatment. Legally, she would have become you. So I wasn't being paranoid. You were being targeted." She leaned forward. "Did you sign anything?" "Not a line." Olivia nodded. "Good. I'm going to keep these copies. If you don't mind, I'll make digital versions too, just in case." I left her office with a plan forming in my mind, not of revenge exactly, but of defense. Amanda believed I was a man with no options. I would show her how wrong she was. but not by yelling, not by fighting. I would play the part she had cast for me, the doddering old man, too slow to notice, too blind to read. Let her believe I had fallen for it. Let her think she had won. That way, when the moment came, she wouldn't see it coming, and when it did come, it would not be quiet. I spent the next few weeks preparing the stage. Amanda, sensing my hesitation, redoubled her efforts. She began dropping by unannounced, always with a smile and a plate of something she claimed she had baked just for me. Dry banana bread, gluten-free cookies, even a quiche that tasted like wet cardboard. Each visit followed the same pattern. Small talk, a forced laugh, a patronizing comment about how hard it must be to live alone with my condition, followed by another gentle nudge about the paperwork. She never pushed outright. No, Amanda was far too calculated for that. She employed guilt, subtle pity, and a sugary concern that made my skin crawl. Her eyes always scanned the kitchen counter where I kept the folder, as if expecting it to magically sign itself. I pretended to grow more confused, more passive. I began using the cane more deliberately, fumbling slightly with objects, squinting at labels. Once, I accidentally called her by the wrong name and apologized profusely. She smiled, almost too wide, and said, "That's okay, Earl. It's normal. That's why we're here." She began leaving more papers. Some were just printouts of medical articles about cognitive decline. Others were checklists titled Signs of Diminishing Capacity, with half the items already mysteriously checked off in blue pen. I said nothing. I watched. Every act of help she performed was another thread in her web, and she thought I was crawling in willingly. Jason, to his credit, seemed uncomfortable. He never came alone anymore, always trailing behind Amanda like a dog too tired to bark. During one visit, I caught him looking at me strangely, as if trying to recognize something familiar and failing. When Amanda left the room to take a phone call, I asked him plainly, "Jason, do you know what she's asking me to sign?" He hesitated. "She said it's just some tax stuff, inheritance planning. She says you wanted help. Did she show you the documents?" He shifted in his seat, glanced at the hallway. "She said they're routine." I nodded slowly and said nothing more. If he had doubts, he wasn't brave enough to face them. It was around this time that Amanda started bringing her friend Gina around. A short, tense woman with bright nail polish and a laugh like breaking glass, Gina was introduced as someone who works with estate stuff. She said it vaguely, waving her hand like it wasn't worth explaining, and Amanda always steered the conversation away from details. One afternoon, Amanda casually mentioned that Gina had agreed to serve as a secondary witness should we need to redo any paperwork. "Just in case," she said brightly. "You know how the legal system is. Always wants double documentation. Best to be prepared." I nodded, offering her the bland smile of someone too weary to resist. But I was preparing too. Every visit Amanda made, I documented. Every paper she brought, I copied. Every odd phrase, every time she slipped and referred to my house as ours, or mentioned future transfers, I recorded in a notebook. I kept it hidden in the drawer where Mary used to keep recipes, under a pile of yellowed newspaper clippings about high school plays and retiree book club meetings. Amanda never looked there. She searched other places. I could tell. Once she left a kitchen drawer half open. Another time, a cupboard door was ajar. She was looking for something. Maybe trying to see if I had already signed the papers and left them lying around. Maybe trying to find banking information. She never said it, but the implication was always there, hovering just beneath her saccharine smiles. She expected me to go quietly. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. Amanda showed up with a thermos of herbal tea and a new stack of papers, this time bound neatly in a folder labeled Final Phase. She placed it on the table with a theatrical sigh. "Earl, she said, lowering her voice like a kindergarten teacher. "I know this is overwhelming, but it's really for your protection. We want to make sure you're secure, that you don't have to worry about anything." She pushed the folder toward me. "It's mostly signature pages. You've already seen the important parts." I looked at her. She was standing a little too close, her hand resting lightly on the folder like she feared I might toss it in the trash. "I just need you to initial a few lines," she said, flipping the folder open and pointing. "Right here, here, and here." My hand hovered over the pen. "You'll read them to me?" I asked. Her eyes lit up, like a trap had just sprung shut. "Of course," she said gently, "just like before." She read the paragraphs in a tone of practiced empathy, smoothing over phrases like revocation of personal agency, transfer of full fiduciary rights, and permanent custodial authority. Each time she said something especially vague, I made a soft sound of confusion. "Could you read that again?" I asked once. She did, slower, her voice syrupy. I signed each page as requested, but with a twist. I wrote my name backward on every line, perfectly mirrored. A trick I'd taught myself years ago when grading plagiarized essays. Amanda didn't notice. She smiled brightly. "That's great, Earl. We're almost done." After she left, I called Olivia. "It started," I told her. She instructed me to bring the documents immediately. When she saw the signatures, she laughed. "Oh, this is gold," she said. "You signed, but not legally. This will be airtight in court. Now we wait." The next week, Amanda called 3 times. Her tone had changed. Gone was the softness. Now it was clipped, impatient. "We need to get these processed, Earl," she said. "Time's running out. You don't want to miss the deadline." He asked innocently, "Deadline for what?" There was silence. Then she said, "For the tax benefits. You remember?" But her voice had a crack in it now, a note of fear behind the insistence. Then, 2 days later, she arrived with Jason in tow. This time, no baked goods, no tea. Just a thick envelope and a tight smile. "We need you to come with us," Amanda said. "There's a notary waiting at the bank. It'll be quick." Jason looked away. "We can get lunch after," he mumbled. I grabbed my coat slowly, deliberately. "All right," I said. "Let's get this over with." They looked surprised. Amanda recovered quickly. "Good decision," she said. At the bank, a young man with slicked back hair and too much cologne greeted us. "Mr. Myers, pleasure," he said, handing me a clipboard. "Just need a few confirmations." I took the clipboard and flipped through the pages. The font was small, but I could read just enough. They were final transfer documents. Everything. House, account access, medical authority, with Amanda's name in bold. I looked at Jason. His eyes flickered. I looked at Amanda. She was smiling too hard. I held the pen, then paused. "Do you have a bathroom?" I asked. "Of course," the notary said. I stood, walked slowly out of the room, and kept walking. Out the bank, down the sidewalk, through the street. I didn't stop until I reached a diner 3 blocks away. I ordered coffee, pulled out my phone, and texted Olivia. It escalated. They tried to have me sign final transfers today. Walked out. Her reply was immediate. "Come in tomorrow. We'll file preemptive action." I sipped my coffee, heart still thudding, hands shaking slightly. I had played along long enough. The performance was over. It was time to act. The following morning, I arrived at Olivia's office just after 9. The autumn air sharp against my face, and the coffee I'd drunk earlier sat bitter in my stomach. Olivia was waiting in her office, already reviewing the previous documents Amanda had left me. Her hair was pulled back, glasses perched on her head, eyes sharp with professional focus. "I've seen enough," she said before I even sat down. "They've crossed into legal misconduct. If we move now, We can take the initiative before they try to involve third parties, which I strongly suspect is their next step. I handed her the latest documents, the ones I had signed with reversed letters. She examined them, then looked up with a slow, satisfied smile. They'll think you've already signed everything. That works to our advantage. What she proposed was deceptively simple. Preemptively file an affidavit stating that I had been subjected to coercive influence, attempted fraud, and was aware of a scheme to transfer assets under false pretenses. She would include notarized statements from me and herself, attach copies of the falsified documents Amanda had left, and initiate a motion to restrict legal access to my estate by anyone but me. It won't stop them from trying again, Olivia warned, but it creates a legal record, and more importantly, it signals that you're not the helpless old man they think you are. I signed everything, this time with my name properly printed, in ink dark and bold. Later that day, I returned home and sat at my kitchen table, where Mary once rolled out dough and hummed to herself and looked at the stack of junk mail piled near the door. Among the bills and coupon flyers was an envelope with no return address, my name typed neatly in all caps. Inside was a typed letter. No greeting, no signature, just 2 sentences. We need to know where you stand. Either you're with us or you're not. Make the smart choice. I stared at the words for a long moment. It was Amanda, clearly. She had abandoned subtlety. The letter wasn't legally threatening. It was personal. A message meant to intimidate. Plain and direct. That night I didn't sleep much. I kept picturing Amanda's face as she slid those folders toward me with that cool smile. I thought of Jason sitting there staring at his phone, a man who once cried when I read him The Velveteen Rabbit and now couldn't look me in the eye while his wife tried to rob me in slow motion. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was resolved. Something had calcified inside me, something firm and unshakable. They thought they knew who I was, a lonely widower with cloudy eyes and no fight left in him, and maybe that's who I had been. But not anymore. Not after what they'd done. I had nothing left to lose. No spouse, no grandchildren who cared, no illusions about family. What remained was mine, and they would not take it. The next morning, Olivia called with news. They've contacted a lawyer, she said. I just got a message from someone named Calvin Norberg. Claims to be representing Amanda and Jason Myers. He's asking for a meeting to discuss misunderstandings regarding estate planning. I laughed without humor. They're already retreating. Not exactly, Olivia replied. They're trying to preemptively discredit your affidavit. We have to be ready. This could escalate quickly. Let it, I said. Let them try. That weekend, Jason called me directly. Not Amanda, not a text. His voice was subdued, like a man standing in the rain. Dad, he said, can we talk? We are, I replied. Face to face, he added. I can come by alone, just me. Amanda doesn't know I'm calling. That caught me off guard. I agreed with one condition. The meeting would happen on neutral ground, Olivia's office. He hesitated, then agreed. He arrived the next day, looking older than I remembered. His face was drawn, and there were lines across his forehead that hadn't been there last year. He sat across from me in Olivia's conference room, fidgeting with his wedding ring. I didn't know it would go this far, he said quietly. Amanda told me we were helping you, that it was just about getting ahead of future complications. Jason, I interrupted. I read every word. She wasn't helping me. She was burying me alive in paper and signing my life away. He didn't respond immediately, just looked down at his hands. She said if we didn't act now, the state might step in eventually, that we'd lose everything anyway. I leaned forward. She's lying to you, son. She's not protecting anyone but herself. I know, he said at last. I realized too late, but I didn't stop her. That's on me. There was a long silence. Olivia remained quiet, giving us space. Finally, Jason looked up. What happens now? You get out of the way, I said, or you go down with her. He nodded slowly. I won't fight you. I just want this over. Then step aside, Olivia said, her voice clear and even. Let the legal process unfold. Tell your lawyer to back off. When he left, I didn't feel better. I just felt heavier, like I had finally put down something I'd been carrying for too long. Jason hadn't defended me, but at least now, he wouldn't protect her either. And that changed everything. Amanda no longer had a silent partner. She was exposed, and now the battle was fully mine. The day after Jason left Olivia's office, I expected silence. Perhaps a week of tense waiting while they figured out how to regroup, a drawn-out retreat camouflaged as reflection. Instead, Amanda struck back almost immediately. I awoke to a knock on the door, not at the usual hour of polite family visits, but at 7:22 a.m., when the sun had only just begun to bleed pale orange through the frost-tinted windows. When I opened it, a man in a slate-gray suit handed me a large envelope and offered a tight professional smile that said he was not here to make conversation. Mr. Myers, service of legal notice, he said. Have a good day. The moment he turned, the smile vanished. I stood on the porch for a full minute after he left, envelope in hand, trying to steady my fingers enough to read. It was a petition. Amanda and Jason, though I now knew only Amanda had authored the action, had filed for temporary conservatorship, citing concerns about my mental capacity, confusion, susceptibility to undue influence, and inability to manage daily affairs. They had attached an affidavit from a physician I had never met, citing a review of behavior and third-party observation that concluded I displayed evidence consistent with early-stage cognitive impairment. There were also attached statements, unsigned and anonymous but clearly Amanda's doing, alleging that I had recently forgotten names, gotten lost in my own neighborhood, and regularly accused loved ones of conspiracies and theft. None of it was true, but on paper, printed in Times New Roman and notarized with a perfect seal, it all looked horribly plausible. I brought the document straight to Olivia, and she flipped through the pages with a cold, controlled rage I hadn't seen in her before. This is bold, she said, scanning the pages, but not smart. These documents are built on hearsay, not medical evidence, but she's clearly trying to establish groundwork for a full conservatorship claim. She wants the court to see you as a liability to yourself. The language is designed to provoke court-appointed evaluations. She's not just trying to get your signature anymore. She's trying to remove your legal personhood. That phrase stopped my breath. Remove your legal personhood. The idea that someone, especially Amanda, could turn me into a ward of her care, someone stripped of the right to decide where I lived or how I spent my own money, was beyond infuriating. It was existential. Olivia filed our response within 24 hours. We attached my notarized statement, records of my normal activities, documentation from my bank showing that I had full control of my accounts, and, most importantly, an independent medical assessment from Dr. Bernard Lawton, a well-respected geriatric specialist I had seen the previous week. Dr. Lawton's report was unequivocal. Mr. Myers shows no signs of cognitive decline. He is oriented to time, place, and person, and is capable of managing his affairs. Olivia had even had him record a short video statement which we submitted alongside the paper. In it, he looked straight into the camera and said, "There is no clinical basis for any claim of cognitive impairment in Mr. Myers at this time. Any assertion to the contrary is, to the best of my professional judgment, either a mistake or deliberate misrepresentation." Olivia smiled when we sent that off. "She won't recover from this," she said. But Amanda didn't retreat. Instead, she went public. Not in the media, No, that would have been too dramatic and left her vulnerable to defamation claims. But she went to the neighbors. She began showing up at church events she hadn't attended in years, talking softly to parishioners I'd known since before she married Jason. "We're just really worried about Earl," she'd say, hand on heart. "He's been so confused lately. It's hard to watch someone you love decline, you know?" I found out about it when Linda Jenkins, a woman who once taught Sunday school with Mary, stopped me in the grocery store and said, "If you ever need help, Earl, don't be ashamed to ask. It's brave to admit when you're struggling." At first, I didn't understand what she meant. Then she added, "Amanda said you've been having a rough time lately. I'm praying for you." I thanked her, heart pounding, and left my cart behind. I told Olivia, and she didn't hesitate. "We're adding defamation to the filing. These whisper campaigns are strategic. She wants to influence local opinion, make you appear unreliable in case the court asks for third-party interviews." The new strategy, as she explained, was both legal and psychological. Amanda was trying to build what lawyers called a construct of incapacity, a fog of rumor and concern that would make any denial of her claims seem like ignorance or denial. If enough people said they were just worried, it wouldn't matter that I could recite the Gettysburg Address backward or calculate compound interest in my head. What mattered was perception, not fact. That week, I received 2 more unannounced visits. One was from a man claiming to be from the county's Adult Protective Services. He was polite, but his questions made it clear Amanda had filed a wellness report. "Just checking in," he said, clipboard in hand. "We got a call from a concerned family member." I showed him my medical report, offered him tea, and even gave him Olivia's card. He left embarrassed. The second visit was from the local sheriff, who said he was responding to a complaint of elder neglect. I asked if Amanda had called him. He wouldn't say, but he saw my house, clean, organized, stocked with food, and nodded quietly. "Looks like you're doing just fine, Mr. Myers." "I am," I said, "but some people don't want to believe that." By now, Amanda had crossed from deceit into full-fledged character assassination. She began contacting institutions I worked with. The library where I volunteered said they'd received an anonymous call warning them I might not be safe to be around children. I was quietly asked to step back from reading hour. My heart broke, not for the loss of the position, but for what it represented. They believed her, or at least they didn't want to risk being wrong. I told Olivia. She wrote a cease and desist letter. It wouldn't undo the damage, but it sent a message. We were watching. Then came the most stunning move of all. I received an offer from a real estate agent I'd never contacted, an unsolicited cash offer for my house. It was a lowball figure, tens of thousands below market value, but it came with a cover letter. "Per prior discussions with your family, we're pleased to proceed with the expedited sale I called the agency, pretending to be confused." The woman on the phone said, "Oh, I spoke with your daughter-in-law last week. She said you were eager to downsize. We have buyers ready to close immediately." I thanked her, hung up, and called Olivia. "She tried to sell my house," I said, my voice shaking. "She tried to sell my house." Olivia filed an emergency injunction the next day. The court granted a temporary restraining order against any transfer or representation of my property by Amanda, or anyone affiliated with her. "She's desperate," Olivia said, "and we've got her backed into a corner." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Every day had become a battle to preserve what little remained of my dignity. I couldn't go to the store without wondering who had heard what. I avoided neighbors I'd known for decades, unsure which of them saw me as a man and which saw me as a burden. The house, once filled with Mary's warmth, now felt like a fortress under siege. I missed her most at night. I imagined what she'd say, how she'd take Amanda by the wrist and say, with that soft steel in her voice, "You don't treat people like that, young lady." But she wasn't here, and I was alone. Until one night, when the doorbell rang just after sunset. It was Ethan, my grandson. 17, taller than I remembered, with a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi, Grandpa," he said. Can I come in?" I nodded slowly. He stepped inside, looked around the living room like he was seeing it for the first time. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," he said. "She told us you weren't feeling well. Said you were getting help." He looked at me. "Is that true?" I swallowed hard. "No, Ethan, that's not true." I told him everything, not all the legal terms, not all the court filings, but the truth. Amanda was trying to take my home and money, that she thought I was too blind to notice, that I was fighting her the only way I could. Ethan sat in silence, then finally said, "I didn't know. I thought you forgot about us." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Never. I never stopped thinking about you." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," I said. He left an hour later, promising to visit again. He never did. But that hour meant everything. It was a crack in Amanda's wall. A reminder that not everyone had forgotten who I was, and that maybe, just maybe, not everything Amanda destroyed had to stay broken. A week after Ethan's visit, as the leaves began turning brittle and gold outside my window, Olivia called to inform me that the court had set a hearing date regarding Amanda's petition for conservatorship. The judge had reviewed both filings, hers and ours, and decided that a formal evaluation was warranted, though he had also expressed skepticism about the validity of Amanda's claims. Olivia, always careful not to give false hope, told me, "This judge is old school. He doesn't like games. You'll have your chance to speak, but be prepared. They're going to try to provoke you." I nodded, already rehearsing what I would say. I had waited a long time for a moment like this. Not for justice in the dramatic sense, not for retribution, but simply for the chance to say what needed to be said while people were finally and legally obligated to listen. The morning of the hearing, I wore the suit Mary had given me for our 40th anniversary, a simple gray woolen thing with modest lapels and polished buttons. I'd kept it pressed, hanging untouched in the back of the closet, waiting perhaps for a funeral or a wedding that never came. It smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs, but when I put it on, it fit. Still, like it was waiting for this day, too. I walked into the courthouse with Olivia by my side, her briefcase under one arm and a calm fury in her step. In the courtroom sat Amanda, flanked by a man I recognized as Calvin Norberg, her lawyer. Jason was not with her. She turned to look at me as I entered, but I didn't return the glance. Her face was pale, her jaw tight, and her blouse, a pristine white with gold buttons, looked chosen to communicate innocence. It was theater, and I refused to applaud. The proceedings began with the judge reviewing the basic facts, then inviting Amanda's counsel to make his case. Norberg was smooth, practiced, and careful with language. He didn't accuse me outright of mental collapse. No, he suggested, he implied. But Myers has exhibited signs of progressive confusion, he said, including difficulty remembering dates, allegations of paranoia, and repeated resistance to reasonable attempts by family members to assist him in managing his increasingly complex affairs. He referenced the false doctor's letter. He referenced Amanda's eyewitness account of my so-called outbursts. He even had the gall to suggest I had unintentionally endangered myself by leaving the stove on overnight, an outright lie. He ended his statement with a concerned tone. "This is not about control. This is about love, about a family trying to protect its patriarch from the indignities of decline." Olivia stood calmly and dismantled him piece by piece. She began with the falsehoods, presenting the real doctor's evaluation, the video statement, the timeline of Amanda's increasingly aggressive behavior. Then she submitted the voice recordings I had made during Amanda's visits, harmless-sounding chats that, when analyzed closely, were laced with subtle manipulations, coercion, and contradictions. She submitted the letter I'd received with no signature, and finally she presented the most damning piece: the real estate correspondence from the agency Amanda had contacted to preemptively sell my home. This, Olivia said, holding up the printed offer, was received by Mr. Myers while he still occupied his house, without his knowledge or consent. The agency was told he was downsizing and that the family was handling the transaction. The family, in this case, being Mrs. Amanda Myers. Olivia let the silence hang after that. It was effective. Then the judge asked to hear from me directly. I stood slowly, gripping the edges of the lectern with steady hands, and cleared my throat. "Your Honor," I began, "I may be 76 years old, and I may walk slower than I used to. I may need glasses and magnifiers and the occasional reminder of where I left my house keys. But I'm not confused. I'm not paranoid. I'm not unwell. I am a man who lost his wife, who tried to maintain a connection with his family, and who was repaid with schemes, lies, and the attempted theft of everything I've built over a lifetime." I looked directly at Amanda. "I read every page, Amanda, every clause, every line you hoped I couldn't see. You thought you were dealing with a blind man. But what you didn't realize is that I've spent 40 years reading between the lines, and I saw you clearer than you ever imagined." The courtroom was silent. Amanda's mouth had tightened into a thin line. Her lawyer shuffled his papers but said nothing. The judge leaned forward slightly, hands folded. "Mr. Myers, do you feel you are in any way incapable of managing your affairs?" "No, sir," I replied. "I'm old, not broken." He nodded, then looked down at his notes. "Thank you. That will be all." By noon, it was over. The judge dismissed Amanda's petition in full and issued a formal admonishment for attempted exploitation under the guise of familial concern. He didn't press charges. That wasn't within the scope of the hearing, but he recommended that I seek a protective court order if Amanda continued her campaign. Olivia turned to me with a smile that was equal parts relief and vindication. "You buried her," she said softly, "without ever raising your voice." Outside the courtroom, Amanda tried to approach me. Her lawyer hung back, clearly finished with her. "Earl," she said, reaching for my arm, this wasn't supposed to happen like this." I stepped away from her hand. "Yes, it was. You just thought I wouldn't notice." She looked genuinely shocked, like a child caught red-handed who thought herself too clever to be seen. "I was trying to protect what's ours," she hissed. "Your son's future." "You were trying to protect what you thought you were entitled to," I said. "You confused inheritance with permission. And now you have neither." She turned red-faced and walked away down the hall, heels clicking like retreating gunfire. I stood there a moment longer, not triumphant, not victorious in the cinematic sense, but resolved. The fight was not over, but the war was, and I had survived. In the weeks following the hearing, the silence from Amanda and Jason was louder than any accusation they'd ever made. There were no more surprise visits, no envelopes with legal threats, no phone calls pretending to check on my well-being. The quiet was not peace. It was exile. A mutual, unspoken agreement that whatever thread had once connected us had been irrevocably severed. Jason didn't reach out, not even to apologize. Perhaps he thought it was too late. Perhaps Amanda convinced him it would be an admission of guilt. Or perhaps, and this was the hardest truth to swallow, he simply didn't care enough. I stopped waiting for a knock on the door. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. What surprised me most was not how much that absence hurt, but how quickly I began to adjust to its shape. I turned my focus inward, to the house that had become both battleground and sanctuary. For the first time in years, I walked every room with fresh eyes, taking stock not of what had been lost, but what remained? Mary's needlepoint still hung in the hallway, slightly faded but intact. The old piano in the living room, untouched since her passing, still held the scent of polished wood and the memory of her fingers. I opened the bench and found the hymnal she'd once used, its pages marked with delicate pencil notes in her looping handwriting. I sat at the keys and let my fingers find a few chords. Not perfect, but steady. The sound filled the house like breath returning to lungs long collapsed. I called the library and asked to resume my reading sessions. At first, there was hesitation, the shadow of Amanda's rumors still lingering. But Olivia had followed up with a written statement from the court, and the board quietly reversed their earlier position. When I returned to that familiar room, the one with the low chairs, the soft carpet, the bright mural of cartoon animals, I felt something settle in me. Not redemption, not entirely, but restoration. The children didn't care about court hearings or family betrayals. They cared that I could do the funny voices, that I never rushed the endings, that I remembered which one liked to sit closest to the front. One of them, a little girl named Sadie, brought me a hand-drawn picture after story time. "You're my favorite," she said simply, and ran off. I looked at the crayon sketch, a man with glasses and a cane, holding a book, and something in my chest loosened. A few days later, I visited the bank and updated my estate documents. I established a charitable trust in Mary's name, directing the house to be donated to the public library upon my death. The idea came to me not as revenge, though I would be lying if I said it didn't hold a certain grim satisfaction, but as a kind of moral correction. Amanda had tried to turn this home into currency, something to be bartered, cashed, controlled. I would turn it into something permanent, something useful, something rooted in the same values that had defined Mary's life and, I hoped, mine. The trust would fund reading programs, community events, even free tutoring for students who couldn't afford private help. I imagined the walls of our home filled with laughter and learning, even after I was gone. It felt right. I wrote a letter to Ethan, a real one in ink, folded into an envelope and sent through the mail. I told him how much that one visit had meant to me. I told him that I understood his position, that the adults in his life had failed him in different ways, and that none of it was his fault. I didn't ask him to visit again. I simply said the door was always open. He never replied, but a month later a small package arrived. No note, just a framed photo of him as a child, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, both of us grinning with ice cream stains on our shirts. I placed it on the mantel beside Mary's portrait. As winter approached, I felt no fear of what lay ahead. My body ached in the mornings. My eyes still blurred the print on menus, but my mind was clear and my soul no longer burdened. I had faced the most profound betrayal a man can endure, not from strangers or enemies, but from the very people who were supposed to hold him with care. I had been underestimated, manipulated, cast as weak, and I had endured, not through anger or violence, but through patience, strategy, and the quiet strength of truth. On Christmas morning, I made myself pancakes, Mary's recipe, with too much butter and just the right amount of nutmeg. I set the table for one, placed a sprig of holly in a small vase, and turned on the old radio to the station that still played carols. The house was warm, the sky outside a gentle gray, and for the first time in years, I did not feel lonely. I felt full, whole. And as I sat there, fork in hand, I thought of all the things Amanda had tried to take, my home, my name, my dignity. She had failed, and I was still here, still me, still standing.